this was a full direct action into a live fire situation against a pretty advanced enemy. We hit the ground receiving fire and returning fire. And out of this maelstrom, this kind of chaos, a young 12 or 14-year-old boy with a severe critical head injury stumbled into us and an old man who'd been shot through the arm as well. In most cases, you'll just check the individuals that they're not armed and move through and continue on with the mission. But on that day, I don't know whether it's an epiphany, but in my mind, I just felt like I've had enough. I really have had enough of this. I've been fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, other places around the world for nearly 15 years straight. And I'd had enough. I'd walked past enough young boys and women and people bleeding.
Harry Moffitt was coming up to almost 3 decades serving in Australia's Special Air Service. He'd been on 11 active deployments and survived some of the harshest environments. He's lived most of his life in situations most people would never even imagine. What we think we know from the movies, it barely scratches the surface. So when Harry talks about this moment, listen closely. It's not the body that's worn down here, it's something much harder to see.
And I just decided we were going to get him out, that I made a decision and put these individuals first rather than the mission. It was a sign, definitely the sign that I'd reached my use-by date.
There are moments where a person's story pivots, not in triumph, not in defeat, but in truth. This is one of those moments. A man who has lived at the edge of human performance, recognising that even there, we are still human. This is the show that brings performance into everyday life. This is Performance Intelligence.
Still to this day, as I said, friends look at me a bit differently. Do they look at me and think I was weak in that moment, or that I was not up to it in that moment? I think so. But sitting here right now, Andrew, I'm really comfortable with that decision because the boy and the old man survived. We survived. And the funny thing was, what gives me, who was on my side on that day was the AME, the Air Medical Evacuation Helicopter and crew. They said, we're coming anyway. This is our job. And if we're not going to save the civilians, what are we here for? Was a message that came over the radio. And I've taken that to bring me a bit of comfort.
First of all, thank you for sharing that. I could feel the intensity and the emotion when you share that. It's still real, isn't it? Like you felt like you went back there. Can I ask a couple of questions on that? The boy and the man, do you know where they are now?
No idea. The village was called Karjaran at the top of a place called the Cod Valley, which was essentially owned by the bad guys, Taliban, ISIS, Al Qaeda, those nefarious guys. And these are bad people. They're not questioned. You can't question their badness. But no idea. I just hope that they got on with their lives. They certainly weren't any threat to us on the day. And the problem in all of these wars and conflicts is it's the civilians who suffer the most.
On that day, was that you coming out? Did you have to suppress some of those humane feelings? So I can't imagine, mate. Like, what do you think happened on that day?
I think I was a bit burnt out. We all were. We'd been on the revolving door, the never-ending summer, as we called it, for, as you mentioned, for a dozen deployments in a row. I spent 14 months out of 18 at one stage away from family, and the other 4 months was spent training. So, I had a few weeks off and got back into it. So, look, I think at that stage, that was not to say that I wouldn't have made a similar situation, depending on in the past. And I had always had a soft spot, a good sense of what civilians were experiencing, and always upset me. But I think on that day, there's just a bit of moral injury. You can only take, as a human being, so much of this kind of human depravity and the job that we're sent to do that makes you cold and numb. And there's that I think is an element of moral injury, the same as and that has a psychological element to it. I'm not too sure. I just think that was, I was thinking about retiring at that stage. I batted very deep. I'm very grateful. I batted very deep into my career. On that day, I would have been 45 years old. So, the average finish age is in your mid-30s. So I was very, very fortunate. I've been wounded in action. I have busted and broken every bone and shoulder, every joint in my body, but I was lucky enough to kind of bounce back each time. Yeah, but there was something definitely at that broke it. I'm not sure it was in a kind of coming out, but I just had enough. I think I just realised, fuck, I've got to. That's it. I want to be better.
I like how you brought in the cricket analogy. I respect that. Batted deep into my career.
Yeah, I was lucky. I'm very lucky because a lot of people didn't make the journey at all. So
you mentioned getting injured in combat, and this is a gripping part of your story. In 2008, an injury. You were driving, struck a landmine. The explosion resulted in the tragic death of a close friend, Sean, and severely injured an interpreter named Saeed, who lost both legs. You say about this, I lost nearly 20 kilograms and more in the equivalent of emotional and mental atrophy. I plumbed the depths of depression, guilt of having killed and mutilated my mates, shame at having left the battlefield for minor injuries, fear of having to face my SAS comrades and explain my fuck up through the drugs, the darkness and self-pity. A small spark glittered. How would I come back from this?
Yeah, well put. Can
I just pause on that for our audience?
Sure. Yeah.
And even in researching this, I read it a couple of times, and reading that then, mate, that is testing you in every possible way. We talk about the hours: physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, social.
Yeah, well, I certainly, returning to Australia, I contracted a bad infection. My injuries were minor, obviously, compared to others, but the whole country's covered in animal shit and human feces, in fact. And I contracted what they described as some golden staph or some kind of unknown infection. So I had to return to Australia, and that really, just sitting there by myself in the dark with an intravenous PICC line in for the antibiotics and low level, cancer treatment drugs. I was on vancomycin, which is pretty heavy going. And that's where I lost all my weight. My brother came around to see me and he cried just looking at me. So I knew I looked bad. But that spark came to me. I remember kind of thinking through the haze, well, I want to get back. If I'm going to get back, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to go to the nutritionist that we had on base, and I'm going to eat and train and go to the physiotherapist and get my legs better. But I had surgery and burns on both legs, and my knee, little did I know, there had some terrible tears in the knee joint. So, and then it just struck me, I was studying psychology at the time, and it was a nascent idea to become a psychologist, that I could do something similar with my mind, this despair and depression and anxiety that I was suffering, exacerbated as I was later to find out by the drugs. Drugs make things worse. Even alcohol makes things worse than they are. And I just committed myself to a gym of the mind. I hadn't really thought about it before, and I spoke with a couple of psychologists at the unit and asked, what does that look like? I want a program. I've got a program to go and learn how to walk again and how to run again and how to get fit. Give me something that I can execute against on mentally, so I can get out of this funk and forgive myself and get back. And so that's what we did. And it wasn't anything revelatory. It was, part CBT, part common sense, and part talk therapy, and all of which together in a programmatic kind of sense was hugely impactful. And I got to say that I was very, very open to it and eager for it, hungry for it. So that helps as well, not shutting off to it. And I'm glad to say that was it all worked really well. And around 12 months later, I returned to Afghanistan, not in a highly dynamic role. That iteration, I still had a bit of work to do physically, but in an out of uniform, less dynamic role, kinetic role.
You've spoken very openly about some of the challenges. Can you give us a story? And then I really want to get into transitions because I'm fascinated in how you've adapted and gone to psychology, and we work in a similar space. So I really respect the work you do, Harry. But can you tell us about a moment where, with a group, or just something that happened where you went, my God, this is just one of those moments where I pinch myself and go, what a beautiful expression of connection or human spirit. Is there a story that resonates for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that question. My mind goes immediately to...
I got to balance it out, big fella. We can talk about the training and the challenges. But there's joy, right, with every job?
There is. And I can give you one with a great contrast. We were the first unit back into Afghanistan after the Iraq debacle, as it turned out to be. But Bush squaring up family ledgers. But we were one morning we were all sitting around the base. We were running long range vehicle operations in northern Oruzgan before the ADF went back in. And there was this huge explosion. The short of it is that the local Afghani population were attending a dogfight, which is a national sport, and hundreds of males had gathered to bet on the dogfighting, and a suicide bomber walked in and cracked off and killed a lot of people and injured a lot of people. And we were the only small but humble medical facility within miles, and they knew that we could do something. So we were overwhelmed in moments. This is about a kilometre away from our base. In moments, our small little 11x11 tent or 20x20 tent medical facility was overwhelmed with some horrific injuries, dozens of people. And without going into too much detail about that, it was one of the most forgettable days of my career. But we spent the day triaging and nursing people as they died, and saving people, and all of us, the boys did a magnificent job. And later on that afternoon, we're sitting around the huts. We had these kind of rudimentary huts, just a couple of them. And we're sitting around and things are pretty numb. Everyone's feeling really down. It was a long day, a bloody day, a tragic day. And everyone's feeling pretty exhausted. And remember, we're men who have families. We have children, of which there were many children who were killed and badly wounded. Anyway, it was my habit, as you've alluded to, Andrew, to take a cricket bat on every deployment that we went on. And used for recreation. We even used them for intelligence gathering at times, and cricket, garnering, harnessing the local communities, building bridges. But on this afternoon, sitting there, everyone's very quiet, very subdued. I grabbed a bat and someone grabbed a ball and said, "Let's go for a hit," and kind of walked across to the airhead where there's a big landing ground, and a couple of people followed, and we started just having a bit of a hit and a talk, and before long, others came along. There was an appeal. There was a bit of a laugh and a sledge, and I rushed back. I just picked the moment, and I just realised that this game of cricket was about to unwind the day for everyone, and in a way that I never expected, in a way that I never realised cricket could do in this context. And I took photos. I got my camera out and just wandered around taking photos. And before long, all these men who were, I'd be brave enough to say that were, for the most part, during the day, near tears for most of it, and certainly near, kind of in a very tense state, started to unwind, jawlines dropped, shoulders slumped. There was a sledge, there was a laugh, and then I just watched the power of a simple game of cricket unwind and allow everyone a release. And I think in a way it was one of the most powerful group therapy sessions I've ever seen or been a part of in my life, and all because of a game of cricket. And I look back now and I just don't see any other game, sport, activity that could operate in that way. I'm sure there is, but a group activity where, the sledge and the appeal and the umpire not giving it out and those types of things, a game of backyard cricket. And that's really stuck with me. And I've used that deliberately at times after those days.
Two really, really important questions to close out that story. Number one, what brand of bat?
The brand of bat for that one, I think, was it might have been. I can't remember. There's so many bats. Grey Nicks, I'll have to say. It's I should know.
Twin scoop?
No, but there is a twin scoop in my collection of bats. Yeah,
awesome.
They're now in the Australian War Museum, so memorial. So you'll be able to see those after early next year if you visit Canberra.
Fantastic. And second, what were your figures? What were your stats?
Oh, look, I got a couple of hat tricks. That's probably the only thing you can really hang your hat on. But you can make up your own figures from those games, mate. Yeah, made a 50, made 100, whatever. But
50 off 22 balls, got 5 for 8 on a hooping deck. I was a legend.
Yeah, well, we used to joke. The running joke was it explodes off a good deck in Afghanistan.
I'll leave our audience to catch up with that one.
Yeah.
What I love about that story is how something as simple as cricket could cut through everything, rank fatigue, the noise of conflict, and just bring people back to themselves. Just for a moment, it's human. And I think for a lot of people listening, they're hearing these stories and thinking one of two things. Number one, I could never do that. Or number two, maybe I am wired for that. So let's bring some reality to it. Because behind the deployments and the headlines and the mythology of the SAS, there's the day-to-day. Harry, can you paint us a picture of what life actually looked like? A typical day, the rhythm, the recruitment, the training, and the real cost and shape of it?
Yeah, so it's a big question, but I could summarise it from my experience, that it can feel like a prison yard you get to go home from each night. It's a tough place, and it's full of tough people who are very forthright in their opinions and their convictions, and also physically and mentally demanding to maintain those standards, physical and mental standards. But, I think in the first instance, you a bit like athletics and competition, you need to you self-select into these things, and that's part of it. So having the gumption or the audacity to think that you've got what it takes a certain type of character in the first instance. There's no real hidden secret. So I often say the secret to being in the SAS is that it sucks, right? Because you're always cold, hungry, tired. You're in some shithole in the globe somewhere. It's not appealing in that way. But I think what's true about it is that you need to be very good at the basics and be physically fit, I would say, on standard with the above average and elite standards in most sports. You need to be mentally tough. You need to. So what does that mean? It means you need to understand your scope and your limitations more than most. We're not in the business of building SAS soldiers. We're in the business of finding people who are ready-made to go into that. So it's that makes it a little more complex. For example, someone who has a high tolerance to ambiguity is attractive to us because our business is not knowable. The opposite of athletic competition is we don't know what the next competition is, and certainly not what the outcome means to be successful. But there's another level. We do need people of high aptitude and intellect, particularly in problem solving and mechanical reasoning, amongst others. And we also are very interested in personality. So just because you're the fastest, strongest, fittest, etc., doesn't guarantee anything. In fact, if you're relying on those skills and abilities, you're probably on the back foot from the start. So we're looking for what I call a bricoleur, a person who can turn their hand to anything with the physical and mental kind of resources to do that. And finally, we really do need people who can withstand long endurance effort within austere environments. No food, nutrition's kind of last on the checklist, no sleep, often in high consequence, dangerous situations. So it's complex. I hope that kind of captures it all, but they are hard to find. Some years we'll have 1,000 applicants, 150 will make it to the start line, and 20 will finish ultimately 18 months to 2 years after it. When
I read SEAL Team 6, they talk about the prancing ponies. So when they do the buds training, you've got the ex-athletes who play NFL or a good track athlete, and on day one they're going, yeah, I was a rock star athlete. But as you went through that criteria, it's a superhuman you're looking for. Physical prowess, someone who's got intellectual horsepower, but they can deal in ambiguity, they can problem solve. So it's IQ, EQ, physical ability to connect with other people. You're really looking for a superhuman. And then they talk about at Buds, the prancing pony who day one or day two has gone there, this physical specimen, and they just get broken down. So you really are looking at the best of the best when it comes to multiple domains.
Yeah, I think superhuman's not a term. I know what exactly your sentiment there, and there is a element to that. We're searching the haystack for the needle in a way, so they are rare by the by. But I kind of think we're looking for someone who's above average across all those things, not the best of the best or the elite in any one domain. It's hard to find someone who's just good enough across all those domains. And the prancing pony, absolutely. You see, I love being there day one when they turn up. And everyone's nervous, everyone's humble because they know what they're about to undergo is going to give them going to push them. But you can see people who have overtrained. You can see people who have focused on potentially the wrong things. You can, so big, muscly guys who have worked on beach muscles and who have an imagined weight in their head that they must be at. They generally don't last that long because you lose a lot of weight. You can lose potentially 10, 15, even 20% of your body weight in a few short weeks. And certainly the mouthy, gobby ones, they're picked up pretty quickly and they're not reflected on kindly. We want the quiet professional, the person, the grey man, as it's always said. We're looking for the grey men, the ones that, and women now, and the ones that to stay in the background who pass everything well enough, knowing that they've got a long way to go.
Is there a perfect family of origin background that you could double click on and go, the average SAS person comes from this background, has done this level of sport, has had this sort of socioeconomic upbringing, or is it really diverse?
It's quite diverse, very diverse. We've got PhD students coming through, literal rocket scientists, and then we've got people who didn't quite finish year 8 in education, people with stable backgrounds versus unstable backgrounds. I think there's two things for me. We've researched this and there's no defining factor. That's the truth. People think they found a personality attribute or a social attribute. But I would say my observation is that people from a country background seem to be better with their hands and turn their hands to more things. It's a very mechanical reasoning or problem solving. So I find that they may do a bit better through the training period, which is what we're all about. The training, the 2-year university that the guys go through is one of the toughest on the planet, and you need to keep up. It's not a learning course; it's a keep up course. So they tend to do well, and I think people who have overcome adversity, whether that's at that age, we're picking people up in their early 20s, mid 20s, someone who's been through a family adversity is probably the biggest thing that people at that stage in their lives. So someone who's already knows and, as I said, understands deeply their own scope and limits. And I think that's important.
You work in AFL, I work across, or have worked in AFL, I work in NRL and rugby union. Talent scouts will tell you on the quiet, if they have 2 kids, everything's equal as far as physical prowess, as far as the way they play the game. If one of those kids has had a harder background, economic background or social background, they'll pick that kid every single time because they've got grit. They've got that ability to work through pressure without crumbling. So it sounds like probably similar parallels with what you're doing.
Yeah, I think so, and I would agree. I would agree with that. It's certainly something that we don't. Our instructors or selectors, the people who oversee the selection, don't have a great understanding of backgrounds, intelligent marks, these types of things. We take people on face value, but you're not surprised to find out that that's the case at the end when you do get to know the individuals. We give them no feedback; they're just a number, and that's in itself is a real test. There's not many environments or contexts in the world really where you get zero feedback in the biggest exam of your life. So that messes with people's head. And so does being alone. When was the last time anyone who's listening's been alone for 5 or 6 days, completely by themselves with nothing, no phones, no nothing? That messes with people's heads too.
Can't help bring an N=1 experience. My eldest daughter is sitting HSC today doing a biology exam. I can imagine how she does that and gets no feedback. She'd go spare. You spend all those waking hours as a young child going into school and education to get a mark. So let's look at the 2-year university. Can you pull out what are 4 or 5 examples of extreme activities, or maybe mundane activities that people have to put through, so you can see that range? So if you're explaining or doing a pitch deck for the 2-year university, what are some of the activities you take people through?
Yeah, just simply put, we do everything that goes bang, weapons, explosives. We put them through high altitude night parachute operations, which, as I said, the SAS sucks. They take really cool activities and turn them into drudgery by strapping 100 kilos to your back and pushing you out at night from 30,000 feet. It's not much fun, really. It's bloody hard work. Diving, we're world experts in diving. Long-range vehicle patrols, special reconnaissance. There's a whole bunch of things. And then there's the skills and abilities that we don't generally talk about. But we also do languages. We do computer science, we do coding, and we understand how to access technology beyond the normal acts of technology. When you think about it, computer, AI, everything like this in the modern world comes from the military. We learn surgery, basic surgery, quite advanced paramedicine into surgical procedures and delivery of all drugs. So, that's a snapshot. And as I said, the real challenge of that is not so much the learning, because we have an excellent university. It's with the world's best practice and et cetera, and it's very engaging, and we have the world's have great instructors and teachers. It's just the ability to be able to keep up with that. So that paramedicine course is not a 2-year course as you get out in the world. It's a 6-week course crammed in, and you need to be passing. Back when I was coming through, they would damage a live goat, and it was your job to keep it alive. And so these are pretty extreme experiences, let alone tests, but they're necessary, and because of the nature of the work that we do.
Huge amount of learning agility. Now, if someone was watching Jason Bourne in Bourne Identity and heard what you just said, and they drew the parallel and go, "Oh, are you like Bourne, this super agent?" What do you say when people say that? Is that Hollywood glamorizing this, or is there some parallels when we see these super agents in the movies and what they're trained to do?
Look, I think, there's certainly things resonate with my background and training, etc. I think, but it is Hollywood. They bring a whole bunch, a whole range.
You guys wouldn't go into deployment. There was always the hot chick there at the port waiting, or the bar with all the people dancing.
No, there's no hot chicks where we go in that context. But certainly we're not really interested in them in the first place anyway. We're probably a bit too serious for that in our own guys. But I think what Hollywood does is it just brings a whole bunch of different capabilities together into one individual, and they become this superhuman thing. But all of the capabilities, from the fighting, from the lock picking, from the phone use, and all the rest of it, they're real capabilities and more. I think Oh Dark 100, I thought, had some really brought it together, probably the best that I've seen on television. But these days, Andrew, there's all of this. There's no secrets anymore. You can Google SASR and find out a bit more than you should about 4 Squadron or other capabilities that we have. So, our job is just to say nothing. That in itself's a skill.
What drew you initially to the military? And then what drew you to the SAS? Did you get a tap on the shoulder, or did you just go, "Ooh, I want to explore this world"? So first, what got you into the military?
My mother was a nurse and my father was a sailor in the Navy. He spent 30-odd years in the Royal Australian Navy. So I came from a life of service, and both of my parents I would call humanists, if there's a way to compartment them. So I was raised with a really strong sense of service and servitude to the community, and I think it's the purpose it's what humans are for, to serve our communities, our tribes, our whatever you want to call it. And so I was kind of destined. My old man, as I said, was in the military. We got a strong military theme going back to the 1600 and the Royal Marines, the Moffitt. So it's in the blood. I didn't know that at that stage. And then a couple of events happened. I've been writing about this recently for an article. In 1980, the Princess Gate Iranian embassy hostage siege in London burst onto a grainy black and white telly in the corner of our house, and that captured my mind, and that was the first time the SAS popped into my mind. And so I was intrigued, absolutely, beguiled. I wanted to do whatever those guys on the balcony blowing things up were doing, and I read voraciously, or everything I could find anyway, on special forces and special operations. It was a golden era of counter-terrorism too, from Djibouti to the Munich Games and Desert Eagle and all these cool, unfortunate, tragic events. But to a young 12-year-old who had designs on the SAS, they were very attractive. And so that was it. I joined the military in 86, and in 1990, way too young, I feel, when I look back, attempted selection, and it was definitely a self-selection. I have I think a reasonable amount of self-confidence, and I was confident that if I did the hard work like I had in my life to that stage, I could do it. And if I couldn't, that would be a waypoint that I could learn from. So I was realistic, I think. And as it turned out, I was ready. I didn't really ever, throughout the course, the selection course in particular, feel I was out of my depth. I felt I was on par, but I was pretty bloody happy to get through. A lot of guys didn't. So.
Well, you not only got through, you ended up progressing to a senior leadership position.
So I reached what is regarded as the senior role of the operators in the regiment. So we have, for those who maybe don't know, we have an officer stream. They spend, 2 or 4 years at the unit over their journey. And then we have the operator stream, which is essentially you run a lot of the operations and a lot of the background and training and everything. So I wasn't interested in becoming an officer, and they go on to command the unit and command the army, etc., because you invariably end up at an Excel spreadsheet or an administrative job in defence. I was all about the boys and the team and doing the job. So, but yeah, I did.
You want to stay on the tools.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, I still do.
Well, still would love to be in there.
Oh, look, I get to go back once a year, and there's no doubt there's a whole bunch of roles I'm just not fit enough anymore to do, and the technological curve now has left me way behind. But I'm lucky enough to go back every year, and I love being around the new operators that come in. They're just so impressive as humans. They're so alive. They're so open-minded and what I call asset-minded. Yeah, it's a privilege. So that gets me, gets the juices flowing, Andrews.
It's an impressive career, and it's a truly remarkable body of work. Honourable, tough, but I imagine very fulfilling. But what about life after service? For many of our listeners, they're mid to late in their careers. We've also got a large defence audience, Harry, that does listen to this podcast, and they have challenges also from family dynamics and balancing their lives. What surprised you most about that transition?
Civilians. I guess having to readjust to civilian time. I hope I don't sound boastful, but I felt in a way, luckily, or just who I am, similar to, I felt prepared for the selection. I felt ready for transition. And I had some great advice from a man that stands very tall in my life, a guy by the name of Gary Kingston. I bring up his name all the time. I know he always says, I don't remember, having this influence on you, but he certainly did. And he mentioned to me very early in my career, within the first 5 years, he would say to us all, to the young, don't let this place be all you are. Don't let this place define who you are. Don't let this place be the only identity that you are. And that stuck with me. And so I set about a course of education, self-education and then formal education. And I always had a mind or an eye to what would be afterwards. And during the latter period of my service, I looked around at some of my peers as they discharged or transitioned. and they just didn't end well. And I was determined not to be that.
Because when your whole self-identity is inextricably linked with, I'm a soldier, I'm SAS, and then you're suddenly not, what are you? It's the banker, it's the person in a consulting firm. I see a lot of this in sport. And one of my real passions, Harry, in sport is to get with men and women at a young age and go, all right, let's work on that performance-based identity because you're not going to be here if you don't. And parallel to that, let's look at you as a person or your purpose-based identity, and they might look at you like you got rocks in your head, but that'll grow over time. So you had a great mentor way back with Gary Kingston to give you that advice, and it was probably a little seed that you went, oh, what the fuck's he talking about? And then he planted it. Over time, it watered and nurtured. So then towards that end of your career, very clever the way you transitioned while you were still serving.
And I think that's a key. In terms of, I don't like the word transition. I'm not a big fan of the current narrative, which is of loss, grief, loss of purpose, loss of identity, loss of tribe. They're the big three that I see in social media, and I reject that. I really do, and I'll come back to that. But you need a taper to pinch an athletic metaphor, if you like. You need to be investing in life after from the moment you join. When I said I go back now, and one of the first conversations we have is I'll have with a young operator who all they see is themselves in the future as this ideal that they have in their head about what it is to be an SAS soldier. They're not quite there yet, and I'll say, "What's your plan B?" Of the 20 people in this room, one will be dead in 7 years. Half of you will be either finished because of family injuries or life challenges, or you've had enough and you want to move on, and maybe 3 of you will last 10 or 15 years. So on odds, it's a short career, and the average is around 6 or 7 years. So we have a chat, and it's unexpected because I think they're going to live forever, and they're going to be.
When you're 20, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about
that's right,
having a bit of fun, earn some money, get a couple of stories.
So I just hope that I can take a few seeds from the tree that Gary Kingston planted for me and sprinkle and plant them in each person. And I've had good feedback. I'm not the only one, but I've had good feedback from operators who say, you know what, that really moved the needle and made me think a bit deeper. And I set up my foundation, the Wanderers Education Program, and we've had dozens. I think we're almost or over 100 individuals learn while they're serving. The military and sports have this. Wait till they're finished and washed up, and then we'll put the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff and help them. With the education, I would like one day to see operators get a beret in one hand and a scholarship, and that scholarship represents not uni, it's anything. Small business, learn how to type, build a table, whatever. And so, for me, mate, I had a good sense of that, and I'm grateful that I did. And the Monday after the Friday I left Defence, I registered as a psychologist and started an apprenticeship as a psych, which I gave myself 4 years. And my mindset leaving was, I haven't lost anything. I've gained all this awesome experience, this embodied wisdom, and I talk about this in the book. It's remiss that we we develop an AFL footballer to within an inch of their bloody life, physically, psychologically, and now socially, and even philosophically, I would argue. And we put all this into them, we care for them, we turn them into great young men and then great middle-aged men, and then we just, thanks, see you later. And very few of them go on to become Scott Pendlebury or life-changing amounts of money. It can seem from the outside, $800,000 a year can seem like a lot of money, but if you're only earning that for 5 years or less, and not even that, the lower ranks are earning much less than that. It's not life-changing at all. It doesn't touch the sides once you hit 35. So
and earning that, and your expenses can go up as well, and then you retire and you've got expensive habits and taste and bills, and then suddenly, like, you're literally losing zeros, where the career path for most people is linear. You go to an apprenticeship, do uni, graduate program, then
exactly,
early 30s, 40s, 50s, you start to capitalise, whereas sport is the opposite. You can go back.
No, that's right, and they are lost. They feel lost, but the reality is that we've got this amazing human being that we need to continue to develop and grow and go on to, I think, lead the bloody world. I mean, the lawyers, engineers, and the beaks and politicians of the world aren't doing the best job.
They could use a little bit more rounding out and skills. I was at Parramatta in 21 and 22. So they made the grand final in 2022. This is not what I think is my best work at Parramatta. It's behind the scenes, like a little bit to help towards that. But, we judge it on success. The whistle went, Penrith started playing, and that's the end of the grand final, mate. That's a very short story. But
I remember it. I do follow league. Yeah.
I was sitting there just sort of hunching down the first half. But I reckon my biggest achievement at Parramatta is when I left, there were 6 young men studying that weren't studying the year before.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I was delighted and still am. At Sea Eagles, we've got a great wellbeing manager there, JB, who I'll make sure listens to this, who does a really good job of also that transitioning. And I love working with him behind the scenes if I can to plant that seed at a young age. Your football career, average NRL player, it's 46 or 47 games. That's average. Now, you've got some that are playing hundreds, so a lot will play double figures or 20. Gosh, if there's anyone listening to this, please don't put all the eggs in the one basket. I love the term future-proofing. You get ready for your next role in what you do now, have a bit of a buffer like you did when you were serving, and do a bit of study and do a bit of reps and sets in other areas. Not only is it going to make you interesting when you're sitting around not talking about the same thing with the same people, that groupthink, but it's going to help you evolve and grow and open up a world of opportunities.
Just then you mentioned, staying, or alluded to staying connected outside. I wrote an article recently, The Allegory of the Village, and I tell this to our young operators that we all come from the village. We all grow up in the village from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 through to our 16-year-old, and then maybe at 16, 17 or 18. This is my book set in the Civil War. Andrew, I was talking about offline. This is the purpose of this book. And at 18 years old, Harry goes off to the extraordinary world, and we're in the mission critical team world, which is part of my business now. We talk about mission critical teams. They leave the ordinary world and go off to the extraordinary world. They leave the ordered world of post offices and parked cars and buses to work and go to the unordered world. That's what we prepare for, and sports is similar to that. There's an unordered element to it. But certainly in the military, Harry goes off, and he goes off to the world, much the same as Homer went off to the world, goes to war, and then we explore that in the Iliad, and then the second part, a set of poems, are the Odyssey, when he returns home. And so for every mission critical team operator I talk to, and every SAS young operator, say, you eventually have to go back to the village. You can't just keep trucking forever, adventuring forever, although you can. But I'm saying the majority, eventually you need to leave here and return to the ordered world. And that's a reality. And so this is where this idea of tapering rather than transitioning, it's a mechanistic term that means nothing, that actually sucks the real essence of what it means to transform and even transcend our life experiences. So in tapering, that is preparing for the next phase from now. You don't have to know what it is. You don't have to care what it is even. You just need to know that you need to be preparing yourself at some level. Just because I don't know whether I want to go into the military, police, into elite sports or whatever, but I know that if I run and do push-ups and keep fit and strong and healthy, I'll be prepared to make a decision and pivot to one of those and then become specific. So it's in a similar way. And in the return to the village, we're at the moment rolling up in a truck and kicking the athlete or the veteran out the back and then driving off and letting them fend for themselves. And that's just unfair in the first instance and remiss in the second.
Yeah, if we can do so much better, can't we? It's at least it's a conversation, and it is getting better. And I'll give you some facts, because you're an anomaly. So you're in defence 25 or more. At what age did you join?
I joined in 86, so around 30 years.
30 years. So you're saying most people are like 6 or 7 years. Here's the latest research from the University of Queensland. On average, a person will change jobs roughly every 3 years, which adds up to around 16 roles over a 45-year career. And when it comes to careers, not just jobs, most people move through 3 to 7 distinct fields, with Gen Z likely to experience 5 to 7 careers across 16 to 17 jobs. When I read that, two things. One, I went, thank goodness there's some research now putting some granularity around this. And two, I am okay because I've got some friends who've worked in a job nearly all their life, and I've worked as a personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach, run gyms, had a wellbeing business, worked in elite sport, travelled the world, sold a business to a consulting firm, done mental skills, aerobics instructor, fitness and everything else in between. I absolutely have ADHD, but those statistics, thank goodness University of Queensland, Harry, is giving me some sense of normality, a feeling of normality.
Absolutely.
So it's fascinating, isn't it? We're going to have 5 to 7 careers across 16 to 17 jobs. So rather than thinking about, as you say, it ends, how do you taper and then take, like, I love the term cross-training, which you know beautifully from fitness, but there's a cross-training around skill set in work and psychology, and what you might learn working in one field, you can go and be quite different and adapt that to other fields. I just think we need to look at our careers in a totally different way.
Yeah, I think this is another thing we'll talk about with young operators too, is, careers is a useful term, but it focuses on the parts of the journey. And what I would ask everyone listening, it's kind of the theme of my book, a central tenet of the book, is that don't worry about the parts as much as you worry about the journey, the whole. There's Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favourite, a great author and a great thinker, philosopher, I think, not by any other name, a small p philosopher, I guess, but he's just an author from the 70s, an American author, and he talks about a group of aliens, that don't look at time like beads on a string. That's how we look at it. And society has become this. In fact, psychology has become this. Performance has become this. Everywhere I look, psychologists, performance experts, strength and conditioning, all the component parts of what is whatever a high performance program is, still trying to work that out. We look at parts and components, and it's kind of in our role, our job, to make it reductionist, to reduce it down to a set of things we can control, predict and influence and impact. And that's fine. That's part of the story. What we don't do, these aliens, when they look at time, they look at a mountain range and they see the whole of the mountain in one go, at one time. They see all of time. And whilst that sounds impossible and off with the fairies, we have lost our ability to see the whole for the parts, and particularly in high performance. That's why I picked deliberately high performance settings, controversially and potentially disruptively, that the component parts of high performance are focused on the parts. And so we, as accumulation, we don't see the whole. And whilst we need to focus necessarily on the parts for the performance, it is not the case that a performance is the whole of the person. And so I'm on a bit of a mission quest to challenge everybody that humans cannot be optimized. It's rubbish. It's a mechanistic term that is derived from machines. The brain is not a computer. It's more akin to a tree than it is to a computer. We just aren't sophisticated enough in our thinking, or we've lost the sophistication to use a tree as a metaphor properly and universally. And the book really is it's certainly not prescriptive. I don't know much about this. You can probably tell I'm still kind of working out. I don't think anyone has. Andy Walsh from Liminal Collective.
And Red Bull formerly?
Yeah, he's moved. We had a discussion on a podcast recently. He's moved over the journey. He's quite advanced in the thinking and agrees. And my book is really more to hear myself talk and understand what I'm thinking. But I have I'm very sympathetic to positions like Dr. Ian McGilchrist's position on the loss of the atrophy of intuition, imagination, creativity, these types of things. And that points to not reducing people down to the part and the performance, is actually to open them up to a vast opportunity of the whole.
Great segue into a quote I've got prepared. A wise man said the following, Harry: "This book symbolises the commencement of this period of gratitude and reflection, a period of connecting and synthesising all that I have been afforded and learned over my journey. I believe we are at the beginning of a human performance revolution to think, be and behave more gracefully."
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure. Small W wise, I'll accept that.
Do you sometimes have your quotes read out or read them and go, Jesus, like I was sharp on that day? And then I did hear on the Mark Bouris podcast, I like your writing style. I do something similar. I've got a mate who's got a house a couple of hours south of Sydney in Geroa. So I love to get there and literally I get into that house. So you go away somewhere, was it an hour, 90 minutes outside of Melbourne?
That's right. Yeah, I went to a few different places and then settled into one or two. But what a self-indulgence.
Geez, it sounds
Andrew,
clever though, Harry. Sounds really smart.
Yeah, to go away and just sit and research and write and be with your own thoughts. But it is a great privilege, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do it. I left one self-indulgent career in the SAS, which is all about me. There's no other way to put it. My wife put up with it to go into writing, and writing is a very self-indulgent, privileged position to find oneself.
I write as well, in case my family or colleagues listen to this. I'm just going to correct you a little bit. It's a very self-focused activity, but the clarity you get from writing, and to then take the noise and the stories and the juxtaposition and contrast and all the stuff we've spoken about today, writing just gives me clarity. And then that clarity helps, as you know, create different products and content and books. And what's interesting about what you teach and a lot of what I teach, it's not new. There was a dude back in 1977 called George Engel who came up with the biopsychosocial model. What I like that you've done is you've taken some of that theory and you've looked at the concept of adding a fourth pillar, that philosophical learning, which complements the physical, the psychological and the social. How'd you stumble into that?
Yeah, I did. I had a sense. I was in 2013, 2012. It really started a lot earlier than that, but formally around 2012, 2013, I found myself as the manager of high performance in the SAS, whatever that means. I didn't really have a clue, but I just saw other places with the names and the badge and realized that we could do a lot more. We were just training beach muscles, chin-ups, push-ups, biceps and pecs. That was kind of it. And I realized that there was this whole world out there of conditioning and specific training and psychology, etc., that was going on. And it was quite nascent. It doesn't sound like that long ago, but back in the early 2000s, there wasn't great science going on at football teams. I can promise you that.
I'll tell you what it was. It was like, all right, fuckers, move. Let's go.
That's right. It was
Moffitt, get going, mate. Give it another. Yeah. It was yelling.
Exactly. And it was the same in our unit. And I just knew there was a better way. We were just rolling busted people out the door and treating them like racehorses back in the day, where they get marched to a hole and shot, That was the start of it. I set up so I went looking. I'm a curious kind of person. I went looking around the world and everything. And around the same time, I met a guy by the name of Percy Cerutty in a book. And Percy Cerutty, there is a very strong argument, very strong case to be made that he is the greatest coach of all time in the modern human performance context. With a tin shack, no high performance, anything behind him, in a time where weightlifting for runners was definitely not a thing, where nutrition was barely an afterthought, where recovery hadn't even been thought of yet or brought back re-presence to us. So these are all things from the ancient agogis of the Greeks. And studying alongside hard running mental work and social gathering, he is ahead of the curve. I think he is still ahead of modern day human performance approaches. We are just, as I said, stuck in the parts. And, I could go on forever. The guy, he was enigmatic, he was divisive, but all disruptors are. For God's sake, Socrates was suborned to commit suicide. He was because he was such a disruptor. And Change doesn't happen from groups or organisations or countries. They happen from individuals. Real big social. If you can, and he was one of those, and he changed the game. And when I met him, I remember reading, most of what he had to offer. They're in the archives here in the Melbourne Library, and what came through time and time again, both from his athletes and from him, was that philosophy is the beginning of human performance. Physiology, psychology, and the social aspect are add-ons, or they're important pillars, if you like. But what someone thinks about themselves in the world, how someone carries themselves in the world, their worldview, how they experience the world, the condition of mind, the condition of the quiddity of their essence, the qualia of their experience. These things matter, and they matter a lot, and no one's talking about them. Do you know, I'm around that time too, I was blown away that simple psychological concepts like theory of mind or philosophy of mind. Now, these are two things that I encourage everyone listening, if you're interested in expanding your experience of the world and understanding. These are two key concepts that we never, ever hear. Theory of mind is I'm not going to explain it. I want people to be curious and go and have a look. Once you tap into it, you'll realise how important a construct that is to understanding everything from a handball to the last turn in a 1,500 metre coming into the straight, to engaging another person in a military context, or about to slice into a body in a medical context. These are, but we never talk about it. I don't know when the last time you ever, when you were coming through, Andrew, anyone talked about the mind. Yet it is the single most pervasive thing that we know the most and the least about at the same time. It blows my mind, and maybe I really am off with the fairies, but that's behind the book.
Yeah, it had a big impact on me. And yes, back to your question, I came through running in the 90s, and my coach at the Institute of Sport was very much on the physical, a little bit of technical, but we didn't speak about mindset. My pain point, I did my best races in low-key meets. Big meets, I choked, took the gas, didn't know how to channel nerves and make them my friend. They were debilitating. So, Harry, I don't want any young boy or girl or mature age man or woman to not perform under pressure when it matters most. So my trajectory, good at sport, not great, exercise physiology, lots of different work with people in business, went back, did a master's in psychology because I realised you're not a head on a stick. And it's still the part where I'm learning, evolving most. So I see, with the evolution and what you're talking about, God, they were doing this 50, 60 years ago, but somewhere we just lost it and just went, it's all physical and mechanical, and the Stoics were doing this thousands of years ago.
Well, again, a great read is The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist, and it's a pretty far out theory, a proposition he puts forward in a very big book, very dense and very. It's a masterpiece of philosophy. I think it's the best book I've ever read, which is outlandish potentially to say on the subject of human performance. I'm very, very sympathetic to his proposition that we have become a mechanistic beast. We've forgotten nature. We've detached ourselves from nature. I say in the book that we've disappeared. One example, we've disappeared the stars in the skies. Have a think about how many times you've seen a bright, shimmering starlight night, such that you can read the headlines of a newspaper and even the print. These have been disappeared from us in much the same way that we're disappearing the elderly. All of that wisdom collected up in lives that are still alive, and we just bottle it all off into the front corner of a room of a house somewhere. And I think we need a big uppercut, humanity, at the moment. Sometimes it just feels like the biggest insane asylum in the cosmos when I look around, and part of that is our mechanistic journey. We need a handbrake, and fast, I feel, and I hopefully the book is partly an old man waving his fist at the weather, but it's a call to a human revolution. I'm sick and tired of industrial revolutions. What are we up to, fourth or fifth? And AI, what a marketer's dream and a complete overreach. I think it's a massive blow up, but we need a human revolution, and that's what the book, I hope, kind of leaves people with a sense of.
I'm going to correct one thing. You're not an old man, mate. You're in your 50s. You're going to get to 100. So you're halfway there, champ. Just keep chugging on and go on those sandhills and take a bit of Percy Cerutty.
Thanks, mate.
I'd like to quote your definition of high performance, and then I'm going to give you the flip. Your definition of high performance, I think, sums up everything we've spoken about today. Your time in the SAS, or your time in military and then into SAS and then running the unit. Your time as a psychologist and working across sport and military and defence, and what you're doing now as an author. Your definition of high performance is a state in which an individual or team achieves a level of sustained performance and success higher than that of their peers. It is at its highest potential when supported by a strategic, systemic framework that supports the performance, growth and retention of its people. Achieving superior financial or non-financial results requires continuous refinement of capabilities, which allows a team to be adaptive in complex, dynamic and changing environments.
Very mechanistic description and a definition of high performance. In the kind of text that leads up to that, I go to lengths to try to challenge the concept of high performance as we see it as a mechanistic kind of. So I end up with a human high performance kind of definition. But yeah, I'm still kind of working that out, Andrew. What is high performance? And recently I've been finding myself saying or thinking that high performance is not so much a state as it is a demand, and whether the individual or team rises to that demand can then be considered a level of high performance. But like all levels of existence and experience, that level shifts, is changing all the time. So going to going to the AFL, are North Melbourne a high-performance AFL team in the context of the AFL? Probably not. They're at the bottom of the table.
Not on the ladder.
Yeah. No, that's right. Whereas Geelong, 20 years, set your mob, South Melbourne, arguably the last 20 years, almost 20 years, have maintained a level of sustained performance that is way above average. So context, levels, time all matter in these things. They're shifting.
And then
so I think
high performance making the top four, or is the high performance converting to grand finals one? We could be talking for hours.
We could be, but that's why in the book I try to pull the reader back to let's park the mechanistic terms and let's get to human performance, which I think is a much more less sexy to have on your door if you're running a football department, but I think it's more true to our intent and the moral imperative it is to grow human beings and look after them.
You're a deep man. You're an intelligent man. I am going to listen back to this. I'm looking forward to listening back. You know this when you're hosting a podcast. You're listening and you're thinking about frameworks and trying to keep it on track and time and where are we going next. I'm really going to look forward to listening back and just reflecting on a bunch of what you've said. I think there's some learnings for me I don't even realise yet. So thank you for not just turning up, but for turning up authentically. I feel like you've taken us, I love the word pulse, from periods of high intensity and focus to drop down and reflect and recharge and renew. And there's been a beautiful oscillation and dance and pulse in our conversation. But in wrapping up, I'm going to give you the flip. Is there a question in preparation for today that I didn't ask you that you're going to finish and go, oh God, Shiny Head didn't ask me this and I wanted to talk about this? Or the flip, is there a question you'd like to ask me?
Well, I would love to offline sit down with you over a brew, meal, beer or something and talk about the future of human performance. I think it's a really important thing that we need to get our heads around. And I only had that compounded by my recent discussion with Andy Walsh. I think it's kind of missing. So I would like to book a date in when we are in the same geography, mate. I would love to sit down and talk about that. Maybe you can come on our podcast and we can make that the central theme, because definitely in the mission critical team world, we're very interested in that at the moment. I'm keynote speaking at the SOCOM, the Special Ops Human Performance Symposium. It's called Human Performance Optimization. So I'm going to be disruptive right from the start of that speech. But in the quest of doing better, transitioning better, preparing better for what's in the future, all the things we've talked about. I think it's a really, really morally important discussion. I guess if there was a question prior, I'd like to leave everybody with something new, something for their kit bags. And if you listen to music while you train, do yourself a favour and explore the Externals, the only special ops original punk rock band in the world. That's probably the only thing I would say. I'd probably get more excited about working in that team than I do at any other team I've been in, only because music is so ineffable. It blows my mind when we're playing a song and we're not looking at each other, but we're all on the same beat, playing the same thing. We're anticipating each other's moves. We're being as one. That as a team performance still beggars my understanding. Still, I still struggle with it. So I just, as Nietzsche would suggest to us, don't look too much into music. Don't try and break it down. Don't try and write it down. Just enjoy it and let the good times roll. I don't think he said exactly that, but that was the gist of my understanding.
Post-production, you're going to hear the dulcet tones and the musical beats of the Externals, a band built around a passionate following of surfers and soldiers. Original core members Harry and Matt have remained throughout, while the Externals have featured a total of 24 close friends and collaborators over the years. They signed a deal with Phantom Records. You're a rock star. Toured extensively across Australia. They've played major festivals, including Home Bake and Big Day Out. Key albums include Anastasia's Hand, Sail and Bushranger Rock. And where are they playing next?
We'll be in the northern suburbs of Sydney in January and down the south coast. The new album's out, Back on the Cans, and you can get that through Spotify. Do yourself a favour. It's good fun.
What a great way to wrap up. Hey, I've thoroughly enjoyed today, Harry. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for the invitation. We'll do it over red wine or two and really explore a more evolved definition of high performance.
I look forward to it, Andrew. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you, mate.